little presentation about the Resilient Food Systems grant, and then we will go from there. It should be about 10-15 minutes. Feel free to throw questions in the chat or to unmute yourself and ask questions. While I'm giving the presentation, please put them in the chat and then we'll go through and answer them. So, thank you guys for joining the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant office hours for the Central Oregon region. Of course, open to anyone who had time today as well. So really quickly, we're going to go over 4 items. So we'll look at what RFSI is at a national level. We'll take a look at Oregon's program, the timeline, and the application process. So to start, what is RFSI? So the purpose of this program is to build the middle of the supply chain resilience, strengthen local and regional food systems, and that is done through supporting expanded capacity for the aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and distribution of local and regionally produced food products. Allowable crops are specialty crops, so which are fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, horticulture, nursery, herbs, but they have to be for human consumption. Dairy, grains for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. This does exclude meat and poultry. Pretty much anyone is eligible for this program as long as they operate in the middle of the supply chain. So producers and processors of agricultural goods, nonprofits, local governments, tribal governments, institutions. But again, the project is really for the middle of the supply chain. This program is. So if you don't operate there, you're not allowed to apply to the program. That's that simple. There are 2 tracks within this grant program. Again, this is national, so this is for all 50 states across the nation and all U.S. territories that are getting these dollars. So the first is an infrastructure grant. Those grants are anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million. It's a 3-year grant period. You either have a 25% required match or a 50% required match. And again, it must expand the capacity for the middle of the supply chain. There are some equipment-only grants we have available as well. That's the second track in this program. It's from $10,000 to $100,000. You must purchase and receive the equipment within 1 year of the grant award. There's no matching required, but again, it must be the middle of the supply chain. So the equipment-only side really is what the title states, equipment only. This is if you need to buy a processing line for a facility so that you can sort apples into different sizes, for example. Just the purchase of that processing line would be allowable under the equipment only side of things. Once you say purchase, install, and let's say train your employees on how the new piece of equipment works, that automatically pushes you into infrastructure grants. Now, under the infrastructure grant, you can also purchase equipment, but those are the 2 tracks. Again, this is all the national level, everything that I've talked about. So let's look at Oregon's RFSI program. We're keeping everything that I've talked about so far and adding a few little pieces of information for you. So again, we're keeping the 2 tracks, the infrastructure and the equipment only. The infrastructure grant is a 3-year grant period to end January 1, 2027. The equipment only grants are going to be 1-year grants, as I mentioned. Both of these do require some sort of reporting. We have an advisory committee of 15 members. It's industry-led, so it's a cross-section of the agricultural industry that would be allowed to apply to this grant, are who we have on our advisory committee. Oregon received $5.9 million in funding through this program. 2.8 of that is infrastructure, 1.2 of that is equipment. $1 million is going to go to a state-led infrastructure project, and the remaining set of dollars is for the management of the grant, essentially our staff time to do things like this presentation or run the grant in general. We do have prioritized applications for this program. Essentially what this means is this is the graduated match amount. So this, if you qualify in one of these areas, you're allowed the 25% graduated match instead of the 50% graduated match. I'll tell you how to get the definitions for these as well in a minute. So if you're a small and underserved business owner, if you're a historically underserved farmer or rancher, or if you're another business that qualifies under the Small Business Administration categories of small disadvantaged business, women-owned business, or a veteran-owned small business, then you're allowed to meet the 25% graduated match. I will let you know if you are a nonprofit or if you are run by a board of directors, the majority of your board or the majority of the folks that run the nonprofit have to hit at least one of these categories. So if you have 10 people on your board, at least 6 of those people have to hit some of these categories. So you could have 3 women and 3 veterans, and that could be how you hit it. But no matter your entity type, you have to meet one of these priorities in order to get the 25% graduated match. Otherwise, you're required a 50% match. The next slide here, if it'll click, there we go. I'm not going to read these priorities to you guys one by one because they're in several places. I'll point them out in a minute. But essentially, these priorities are for the infrastructure track. So these are things like improving the capacity of entities to comply with food safety regulations, coordinating initiatives to build cross food supply chain resilience, increasing capacity, aggregation, processing, and so on. The only one that I really want to point out here is the last one. So this is other goals identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. The USDA got dollars to essentially build these food business centers across the nation, and ours is the Northwest Rocky Mountain one. And these food business centers are really there to push food businesses to the next level. This is helped through numerous types of programs, grants, assistance, and other things. So this is still being built out as of now, but they do have their 4 priorities. If your program meets one of their 4 priorities, as well as one of the other priorities listed here, on your application, you can select the other priority and put in that your project meets one of the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center priorities. As per usual with our grant programs in the department, we do not provide points, any extra points for any priority. All these priorities are viewed by the department as necessary and required for the middle of the supply chain. So that being said, none of these priorities get more points. None of these priorities get more priority than any of the other ones. But if you have another goal identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, we just like to see that because it is a cross-platform support of another program through the USDA's eyes. So that's why we have that here. The next priority set is for the equipment. You'll see this is pared down again because equipment can only purchase equipment. This is, again, aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, or distribution, again, in the middle of the supply chain. You'll also see on here there is the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. You can also look at their priorities and see if your program meets that as well here. Same thing goes as with the infrastructure. We don't give you any more points or any less points based on these priorities. Up next, we will look at the timeline. So to start, infrastructure grant is currently open and accepting applications. It opened January 1st, 2024, and it will close February 29th, 2024 at noon. So you'll have 2 months to live with the application and really look at it and take your time to build your matching, your application, and everything in between. Equipment, because it's approximately half the size of the infrastructure application, as well as there's no match required, we only have a month to apply. So that application will become available February 1st, 2024, and close the same date as the infrastructure, February 29th, 2024 at noon. I will note that the system that you upload both of these applications on can be finicky. Please make sure to not wait until the last second to upload, because if multiple people are doing that, it might cause the entire system to go down and then your application wasn't received, and that's not good for you guys or for us. So please note that you should apply maybe February 29th by 11 instead of by noon, or the day before or a couple of days before. It just will make sure that your application gets to us on time, but it will also allow you guys the peace of mind to know that the application actually got to us. So past the February 29th deadline, you'll see here on the right-hand side, there is a ton of extra dates. So all of these dates are for both infrastructure and equipment tracks. So obviously you guys are attending an office hour right now. That's throughout January. We only have one more, I believe, on Friday, but this will get posted on our website. Several of the other ones are already posted. Feel free to go through and view them. It's the start of this presentation throughout all of them, and then there are questions from the folks that attend those regional ones. So the applications will go to the advisory committee for review the first part of March. The advisory committee will have a meeting and a discussion the first part of April, and the director's office will select the sub-grantees April 30th, by April 30th. As an applicant, you should look for award notification the first part of May, and then the end of May, we have to submit the applications to USDA for their approval. So throughout May, we'll do an editing process. Make sure the application is good to go in USDA's eyes. We are anticipating that USDA will say, woohoo, your projects look great. You can start spending your money by August of 2024. However, USDA is still working on their review process. So it could be as early as we get the money in July. It could be as late as we get the money in September. We don't know. Or it could be even later in October. We don't know. So we're hoping that the grant starts in August. But regardless of the start date, the grant has to end by January 1st of 2027. So all of that to be said, let's look at the application steps that your application will go through within that timeline. So to start, once you submit the application, it goes through stage 1, which is allowability, completeness, and feasibility review. That's done by program staff, aka me. This review is essentially making sure that you can adhere to the bounds of the program, that you have the amount of match that's required, that you're working with the crops that we can do, and your project is even something we can fund, because there's no use in us reviewing a project that USDA would automatically kick out. The second stage is the advisory committee review. The advisory committee is the folks that I talked about earlier, that 15-member industry board. They use the score sheet that is available on the request for applications document. I'll show you where that is in a minute. They use that document to score every proposal. Then we, as I mentioned, come together, have a discussion about all of the scores, all of the proposals, and we move that on to the ODA leadership. The leadership will use the notes from the program staff, the score sheets from the advisory committee, as well as the comments from the discussion of the advisory committee, and a few other factors about the project. So they use like the location of the projects, the crops of the projects, the number of beneficiaries, the area, all of these other factors get brought into the decision, mainly because we want to make sure the funds are spread out equally across the entirety of the grant, as well as the state of Oregon. Like, we don't want to give all of the money to, let's say, the berry industry, or we don't want to give all of the money towards aquaculture. We want to make sure it's spread across and that it's for the best use. So the leadership will again select the first part of May, and then the grants that are selected move on to USDA final review. There are several required documents for both tracks. The first one, the first couple, are the same for both documents. So cover pages and application. These are USDA created forms. They're available on our website. The equipment one will become available February 1st. I'll show you where they're at. Essentially, the cover page is your contact information, making sure that we know who you are and how to get a hold of you. And then there's the application itself, which I created a YouTube video. I'll show you where to find it. That's an application training video. Essentially, it talks you through line by line, item by item, what to put in your application, based on your project. So how to write your project background, what you need to include in your budget, those types of items. Attachment A for both infrastructure and equipment is the critical resource and infrastructure letter. Essentially what this letter is stating is that you have a critical resource or a piece of equipment or yeah, critical resource or infrastructure. You have a piece of equipment or you have a piece of infrastructure already in place that is required to do your project. Let's say, for example, you've got you're putting in a processing line. Let's use that example that I used earlier. You're putting in a processing line to process apples. You need to show us that the facility you're putting the processing line is capable enough to put that processing line in. So if you're renting that facility, you need a critical resource letter from, let's say, the owner that you rent from, that they're going to rent to you for at least the duration of the grant. Basically, you're just saying that that land is not going to be taken away from you halfway through the process of your grant. That's for both infrastructure or equipment. Attachment B is a matching funds verification letter for infrastructure. You are required to have your matching funds secured prior to applying. So you need to have your 50% or 25% matching funds secured by the end of February when you apply to the program. This is so we make sure that you can even apply to the program in the first part. But you need a matching funds verification letter for every source of matching funds that you have available to you. So this is, let's say when you're putting that processing line in, part of installation is you need to update a plumbing system, wastewater treatment or a plumbing system. And that plumber is going to donate part of their time as an in-kind match donation to your grant. You would need a match verification letter from the plumber, basically stating, I'm going to spend X amount of hours, which equals X amount of dollars on this project, and the plumber would sign it. Again, we have required templates for both of these documents on our website. I will show you where that is. That's all I've got for the quick overview. This is our email address. I'm going to go ahead and leave that up, but in the show here. So feel free to email us at any time. I'm going to put our contact in the chat here. This is the Resilient Food Systems Grant, and then I will also put my personal line in the chat as well for contact. Feel free to reach out at any time. I'm here to help. Other than that, that's all I've got for you guys. So let's dive into some questions. Feel free to unmute or put your questions in the chat. Go ahead, Carly.
So quick question. I am the regional food bank director at Neighbor Impact. We are building a warehouse to distribute food. However, and we need funds for coolers and freezers. However, we do, and so specifically we're looking for a cooler, but I did see in there that there is no pork or beef allowed.
Correct.
And so if we distribute that at all, then we're ineligible.
So essentially, I get where you're going with this one. We get this question a lot. You have to give us an estimated percentage of the items that would be unallowable going through that facility. Okay. So let's say 40% of your freezer cooler space was unallowable items, 60% is fine. You could only ask the grant to pay for 60% of the cooler itself. The remaining 40% also could not be brought as a match. So your entity would have to figure out a way to come up with the remaining 40% outside of the bounds of the grant to fulfill that. Now, you could say this cooler itself is only going to be denoted for products that are allowable through the life of the grant. Once the grant ends, we have no control over how you use that cooler. but during the life of the grant, it's only going to be used for allowable items.
Okay, so like our cooler, we actually do not move meat through our cooler, but I wasn't
Great.
sure because overall we move beef and pork if we would be allowed to even apply.
Yep, you would be allowed to apply. You just have to be extremely clear that the cooler, the freezer, it's only going to be used for allowable produce. So no meat, no wild caught seafood,
Gotcha.
no
Or
poultry items.
poultry, I mean, yeah. Okay,
Yep,
perfect. Thank you so much.
no problem. Um, yes, Vincenzo, you're a little bit late. Don't worry. I am recording everything. It will be posted on our website at least within the week, hopefully. So you're good. Don't worry about that. Shane had a question. What are the thoughts and ground rules on vehicles that could be used for delivery? Shane, you might need to give me a little bit more information about this, but vehicles are allowed under the special purpose equipment portion. So you have to give us a good enough reason why the vehicle is in the middle of the supply chain in order to be allowable. So, for example, if you were to just buy a pickup so that you could run around the farm and transport, Shane, if you're talking, we can't hear you. So if you were to buy a pickup, yep, still can't hear you. Okay. If you were, nope, I can see your little squares lighting up, but I can't hear you at all. Okay, I'll just keep going with my example. Hopefully this helps. Why don't you put anything more in the chat? Essentially, if you were to buy a pickup and you were taking that pickup and making deliveries of your, let's say, CSA to your end user customers, that wouldn't be allowed. But if you were buying, let's say, a cold storage van that you needed to pick up produce from multiple farms in the area to bring to an aggregation hub to sort, and then it would go to wherever, a grocery store, institution, restaurants, that would be allowable. So it has to have a special purpose within the supply chain in order to work. Cold storage vehicles, just like a piece of equipment like a tractor, probably wouldn't be allowed if you're running around the farm with it, using it for harvest and all of that stuff. You have to make sure that you justify why the vehicle for transportation and delivery is in the middle of the supply chain. So again, if the delivery is to the end user, is a CSA box to your CSA subscription, is to the farmer's market where folks actually purchase directly from you, those items would not be allowable. You have to be taking that produce or dairy product or whatever your grains, you have to be taking that to somewhere where they're going to end up selling it to the end consumer. So that's kind of a weird one, but if you have any more specifics on that, I could help you a little bit. Other questions? Well, that answered, Shane. All right. Hearing none, I'm gonna give you guys, or seeing none, I'm gonna give you guys a I'll answer Shane's question, then I'll pop over. How about purchasing a container to be in a stored area? Again, is this the middle of the supply chain? I would, if it is, you can purchase a container to use as storage for middle of the supply chain activities. Let's say your, oh, I think we can hear you now, Shane.
Can you hear me now?
I can. There we go.
Okay. I'd be more specific. One of the things we've looked at is for our infrastructure that we need is we've looked at purchasing the storage containers, the Connex style, and converting it into being it's for honey, a place that we can climate control the honey to keep it from crystallizing, Bottling, labeling, those kinds of processes can happen in that container. So one of our brainstorms has been to purchase that container, get it with the climate control features, basically a heater, and then we might put like a label printer or a bottling machine in there. And it seems from what I've read that that would qualify, but need some more input on that.
Absolutely qualifies.
Okay.
Those are the types of projects that we're looking for. So we're looking for things that are in the middle of supply chain. So that's processing. We're looking for things that are allowable. Honey's allowable under the specialty crop definition. And we're looking for things that build resilience of the middle of the supply chain. So instead of sending your honey out to be bottled and labeled and all of this other stuff, you're bringing that process into a local regional area to say, we're going to do this here. We're going to maybe hire a couple people. You're building essentially resilience by allowing your regional area to have access to good local regional honey. So that would be allowable.
Great. One follow-up question on that. Because of our location and our rural location, one of the questions that came up is power often is an issue for us. And if we were to set that up with solar power to run lights, heater, whatnot in that facility, would that be allowable?
So I want to say yes, because the power would be just used for that facility. As an example, someone recently asked USDA in one of our meetings if a generator would be allowable to be purchased. And the hard part about something like a generator is that it can be used wherever. Like it can be detached from the container and then go be used as someone's house generator, when we get Snowpocalypse 2.0. So if the power that you are creating from those solar powers to make that unit a standalone unit is just for that unit, then yes, that would be allowable. But if you're then taking that power and say putting it into a house that's on the property or putting it into, let's say the production side of honey, so into where you're heating and storing the bees over winter, that item would not be allowable. But again, if it's just the power for the unit, so if there's power on site, connecting the unit to that power would be allowable. But again, you'd have to be very specific about the solar power portion of it. I will let you guys note or tell you guys as a note, we only have $2.8 million available for infrastructure grants. That's it. That's all we have. That 2.8 million has to go across the entire state, and we don't anticipate funding one company at $2 million. We don't anticipate funding one person at $2 million. And we do reserve the right to do that if the project's like for the entire state or for a huge region, it's going to be a huge impact and so on. But that being said, make sure that your project is reasonable, allowable, and within the bounds of the grant. So Shane, I understand that being rural, power is kind of an issue. You might make sure that your project isn't getting too big for the bounds of the grant. I don't know how much a container for storage would be. But if the container's, $750,000 and then your power is another 750,000, that's a 1.5 million. Like we're not going to be able to fund a project that large for a single entity. So just know that.
Correct. Okay, so we've kind of been penciling some different budgets for our we were brainstorming last night. What if we could? And that was the vehicle thing. Was we just kind of that was when we just kind of need to check off. I don't think anything we would do would qualify for that. But that building, we're looking at less than 6 digits.
Great.
The other question okay.
The one thing is it has to be at least 6 digits because the bottom portion of that program is $100,000.
But if it's just if it's just equipment, that's kind
So
of what
if
Hunter
you need to get that, if you need to get that container shipped to your location, if you need to get any sort of power to that container, if you need to get any sort of underground done, water, that automatically turns it into an infrastructure grant. So if you're just buying the container itself, you're going to pay for installation. Shipping can be a part of the container purchase. We understand that. But installation, power, water, any of that stuff automatically pushes it to an infrastructure grant.
Great. So if the only way it would work is just the basic equipment is if it was shipped turnkey, ready to go.
So you can purchase like the container, all of the pieces of equipment that go in the container. That's fine, but you would then have to spend the money to put it together yourself or buy somebody to put it together, and then also install it on your location without any extra funds from the grant.
Great. That answers that question very well. Thank you. A follow-up question that has come up. On a commodity that requires ODA involvement we haven't seen the applications yet. I think we're kind of leaning towards the equipment, so we've kind of waited to see that one. But is there a spot in there where we need to show ODA's, I guess it's licensing is what I would call it, like, so when we had to go through the process of getting our current facility licensed for bottling?
No, so you don't
Okay.
have to show that because we understand that these could be portions of construction projects or portions of pieces of equipment that may or may not actually fall under licensing guidelines. However, if you have those licenses, it's best to note that in the application itself, where it says in your project purpose section, you can say you already have all the licensing or you're going after the licensing or etc.
Great. That answers that question.
Perfect. Any more?
I have one more. Sorry if I'm taking
Okay.
all the time.
We've got until 2:30. You're fine.
So, and I think I know this, but just to be clear, if we were to apply for the infrastructure grant, what about consumables? And I guess what I'm getting at with that was if we purchased a printer, to another kind of one of our questions, if we were to purchase a printer for labeling product, is it just the printer, or could we put in there consumables that go with the printer?
You can put in consumables. Anything under $5,000 is considered a piece of supply. It's not a piece of equipment. So, that would be allowable. So this program allows indirect costs as well as personnel costs, other costs, and so on. So you can, if you're doing an infrastructure project, you can say, okay, Grant, it's going to take me 20 hours to organize the application organize the project as well as do all of the reporting, all of the financials and everything. You can charge the grant the time it takes that you're working on the grant. So you can charge your personnel time. You can charge consumables of, your printer labels, as well as you can charge the printer itself. But as I said, anything under $5,000 is automatically a supply. So if you're putting this container together and let's say you're doing one of those heating units that I can't remember what they're called, like the room heating units, the long skinny ones, and it's under $5,000. That would no longer be a piece of equipment. It would turn into a supply. Now, the key part about that is equipment does have to go through a disposition process with USDA. Essentially, that's USDA looking at the piece of equipment, the cost of the equipment, and saying whether or not, somebody needs to go out and double check it or there's just they're coming up with a whole disposition process. However, If it's a piece of supply, it does not require the disposition to go through the disposition process, which is easier on your end as well as our end. So if you have a printer that's under $5,000, if you've got the heating unit that's under $5,000, the bottling unit is, all of these things are under 5,000. The container itself, let's say, is 10,000. That's totally fine to have all of those items listed in your supplies. If those items are under $5,000, they are no longer in your equipment section of the application. They get moved to supplies, which would make it an infrastructure grant.
Got it. I'm sure I'll have more questions as we see the application. I think we're wanting.
No problem. And again, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we want to set the two applications side by side. Our goal is to take this meeting and go back and look at kind of our wish list and then see which one they fit at best, and then probably follow up with some questions at that point.
Great. And that is a perfect segue for me. So thank you for that, Shane. To show you guys our website. So this is the Oregon Department of Agriculture's website. I've scrolled in a little bit, so hopefully you guys can see it a little bit better. I'm working on a huge monitor, so it's like massive font to me. Essentially, this first section is really how we got the dollars, what the program aims to do. But this link right here is what I want to really show you guys. It's a program overview and an application training. It's about an hour and a half to 2. The first 30 to 45 minutes is basically the presentation I gave you a few minutes ago, but in more depth. Additionally here, Shane, this is something you'll want to know about, is again, I walk through the application line by line, item by item, and I do it for both the infrastructure and the equipment grant. So you can see the equipment application, it's just not available for download yet. But in this link, I'm going to go ahead and mute it. Okay. In this link, you go through the whole presentation, and the last little bit talks about the applications itself. So this is me going through the application. This is the infrastructure application. And then it pops over to the equipment application right there. And then, well, the last half hour of it. The last little bit of this presentation as well talks you through how to actually apply using our upload process. So we don't accept applications via email. You have to upload it to our FTP. This link is at the top of our program page right here. So right under project types. It's in a few other places I'll point out too. This next section just talks about the 2 tracks that we've discussed. So infrastructure and equipment, talks about eligible products, eligible organizations, and then it pops into the timeline. So as I mentioned, this meeting's being recorded. It will be put right here on the Wednesday, January 17th section. Once we get it uploaded to our YouTube channel and we get a link, it'll get thrown in there. Let's see. Then the video, again, the application training video is right here. Feel free to go and use it. It will take you to the same YouTube video. The next section is what we talked about in our presentation, the review process and when grant work will be estimated to start August 2024. But really what I want to point out is this resource section. So this resource section is going to be your very best friend when you are applying to the grant itself. To start, this is the ODA's FAQs. These FAQs are going to give you different things like the definition of the middle of the supply chain. So this is USDA's definition to help you. Definition of infrastructure, all of that stuff. But the big one is the USDA definition for the 25% graduated match. So if you're historically underserved farmer, beginning farmer, rancher, disadvantaged business, veteran, farmer, rancher, veteran-owned small business, or a women-owned small business, these are where you can get the definition for those items, so you know if you qualify for the 25% match. This also gives you some weird little questions you may or may not have about the application, eligible entities, crops, unallowable costs, and then matching funds. This last section is all questions about matching funds. And again, the definition for the 25% graduated match is right here. This is on our website. It's the first resources link. The next resources link is our request for applications. As I mentioned in the presentation earlier, this has our scorecard on it. So essentially what this document is everything that I've given you today, everything in the presentation that's on our YouTube video, and everything in the website just in more of a written form. We understand that folks learn differently, so we want to present the information in different formats. There's also a Spanish version and a Swahili version if you need those or if you have folks that need those. So this talks, like I said, talks through everything. Eligibility, funding, priorities, solicitation process, literally everything. But the last couple pages are the proposal score sheets. So this is what the advisory committee will use to score your projects. So feel free to read through this and understand a little bit better about how your project is going to be looked at and how you can score the most points. There are a few other attachments like the attachment A, evidence of critical resources, and attachment B, matching funds verification letters. There's the graduated match calculations to help you kind of understand regular calculations and whatnot, matching funds requirement, and a few other random pieces of information that you may or may not need. But this is there. The next set is, again, the application training video. Please use it. We spent a lot of time putting that together, and it's really helpful, so please use it. The next link here is the actual application itself. Now, I want to be extremely clear. When you click this link, you are going to get an error message. This is the error message. Once it loads, you should see. It's thinking about it. It says, please wait. You don't have to wait. Because of the type of form this is, it's a dynamic form. So essentially, it grows and it changes as you fill it out. Because of that ability of the form, you cannot fill it out online, period. So you need to go and click the little arrow over here in the upper right-hand corner with the line underneath it, or the little floppy disk save icon. Once you have downloaded the document, you can then open it, but you have to, again, open it off of your online portal. So if I were to click this download right here, it would just open and give me another please wait notification. So what you need to do is you need to go to your actual computer files. Let's go to my downloads here and double click and open it within Adobe. Now, this is what the application should look like. So you'll get this beautiful, wonderful PDF document that's 12 pages to actually fill out. Again, I walk you through how to fill this out, everything online on that YouTube video. But if you keep getting this error message, please feel free to give me a call. I will walk you through how to do that. If you guys want to put your emails in the chat, I will do a couple of things. I will share out our website. I will send the application as an attachment. I will send you guys, or I'll put you guys on our listserv, and then I'll also send out the document that I'll talk about in a minute, the links document. But let's go back to the web page. After the application template are the two attachments, attachment A and B, and then the unique entity identifier, or UEI, right here to help you register for that. I go through this on the website or on the webinar, but essentially you need a UEI, a unique entity identifier, to tell us that you can receive federal dollars. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to have this by the time you apply to ODA, but we have to have this by the time we apply to USDA, so the end of May. So you really need to get started on this if you don't already have one. You are not required to have a registered UEI, but you are required to have a regular one. The rest of the documents here are just extra informationals if you need them. And the equipment application will be coming soon. One thing I did want to show you guys is the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business website as it's pulling up. In this green ribbon they have across the top, their high priority issues, those are the issues that are considered their goals. So this is where you would read through that and see if your project meets those goals. Before I pop over to my next document, there was a question in the chat for in-kind matches. Is there a guidance or recommendation of hourly rates? For example, do I need to justify the owner's time as $35 an hour? Yes. So there are a few guidelines on matching funds for that. Oh gosh, where are they? Indirect costs, NICRA. I believe personnel. Oh shoot. Where is it? Essentially, the best way to provide that is to provide a letter that's from that entity that says they normally charge X amount of dollars. You can do that through like an invoice or a quote for their time for what they're doing. If it does seem astronomical, we will ask you for more verification about that. So for example, if you said, one of your workers on the line makes $150 an hour and they don't do anything, we're going to question that. But you don't necessarily need to provide a full list of justification as to why that person is $35 an hour or $40 an hour. We just have to take it as is. And then you would provide that match value in, let's say, the personnel section. But please make sure for each individual that you do list, part of the matching is providing a justification as to why that person is needed for the position in that grant. So you would say, the owner's time is $35 an hour. They're going to provide X amount of hours. This is how much it is in matching, but this person has these, what am I trying to say? These qualifications for that position, which is why they are in it and why they are doing what they're doing. So just make sure you do that. No problem, Shane. So the office hours links document that I will be sharing to you guys via email after this meeting. This is just a one-pager that has a few things that you might actually want. So first and foremost is my contact information. So I'm currently in charge of this program and running it, so feel free to reach out. This is our email again. These two lines are my direct lines, so feel free to give me a call at any time. If I don't get back to you in 24 or 48 hours, feel free to reach out to me again and say, hey, I need clarification on this. I understand that this application is big and long and arduous, and we want to make sure we are communicative. So a couple of links that will help you in all of this. First and foremost is, whoopsie, that's not what I wanted to do, is our main website. So feel free to go to this. This is the RFSA website I showed you a minute ago. The next one is the actual request for applications that I talked through earlier. This has the score sheet on it and so on. This is the application training video. Again, the YouTube link to that. This is our FAQs for the ODA list. So this is where those definitions were and that couple pager of all of the questions for you. The SAM.gov link to register for a new UEI or double check that you have a UEI. The Small Business Administration link. This will help you better understand if you qualify as a small business. But it also has those definitions that are in the FAQs, as well as in this next link. This is the program scope and requirements. Section 9.1, page 27, has all of the definitions that are in our FAQs, as well as on the Small Business Administration website. The last one is a link to the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center, that beautiful green website I showed you earlier. Again, I will send this out to you guys to the emails in the list. Other questions? Because that's all I got for you guys. I saw only two people put their email in the chat. If the other two of you guys, Megan and Vincenzo, if you guys want to throw your emails in there, I will send you these documents as well as subscribe you to our press releases so that you get all the up-to-date information. Great. Any other questions? All right. Shane is typing. I don't know if you have another question. I want to make sure we get them all answered for you. Not a problem, Shane. All right, guys. I appreciate your time. Again, my information will be on the email I send out, but it's here as well as on our website and a few other places. Feel free to reach out at your leisure when you have questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. And thank you guys all for your time.